بسم الله والحمد لله وتوكلت على الله ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. When I was going to pick up my daughter this morning, I saw a pretty crazy accident, actually. A car had rear-ended another car, and it exploded. It like literally exploded, both, and then both cars were engulfed in flames, caught on fire. I mean, it really looked like something from like Hollywood movie. And subhanallah, man. It is a reminder how precarious this thing can get called life. So I've been trying to take the advice of this cat called Matty Hapoja. I'm sure I'm butchering his name. I think originally he's Finnish, but he lives in Toronto. And he's a filmmaker and a YouTube cat, and I've been learning a lot from some of his videos. But beyond, anything specifically technical, he's like, you got to get out and you got to shoot footage every day. You got to get out, and because that way, the only way you'll really improve, of course, is, you have to practice. And it's funny because I felt pretty comfortable in some ways, or at least I thought I did. I felt comfortable, or I do feel comfortable with a still camera, right? I went to photography school like 20 years ago, and we didn't really do a lot with video, but my approach to this was like, well, what's the difference between motion picture and still picture? I mean, motion picture is just moving still images, right? And they still got all that stuff like f-stops and aperture, and so how hard could it be? And to some degree, that part I kind of get, although it's funny, man, I never came to realize how crucial of a piece of equipment an ND filter was, a neutral density filter, because it's just so hard to shoot in daylight without everything kind of getting, blown out. But it's been an interesting thing to go back after all this time, and I definitely rekindled, my interest of being behind the camera. And, when I shot before, even though I like to do mainly documentary work, I was starting to also, get some working clients. Like my brother, who's a professional musician, he was endorsed by Ibanez Guitar at one time, who's a pretty major, guitar manufacturer. And so, he was endorsed by Ibanez, and I wound up doing some work for Ibanez that was kind of cool. And then a few other clients, and then I just kind of got out of photography for a number of reasons. One, it was getting harder. It's one thing to go to photography school, and then it's another thing to know how to make a living, doing photography. And I was never able to quite grasp the latter. But then now, fast forward like all these years, and it's kind of neat how it's really interesting how you kind of have this um, trickle down technology, I guess you could call it, where um, I mean, when I was in photography school, video, it was not like this where you could have a $700-800 body that could shoot such amazing high definition, but then also being able to put like serious quality glass in front of that and able to actually make little films and stuff like that. Now that that's trickled down to where it's pretty affordable, yeah, this is definitely, it's been fun. Of course, then that's had to require going to learn something to edit in, like, I've been working mainly in Premiere, and I find it, to be honest, man, not really straightforward, which was surprising, I guess, because after, probably 20, 30 years of using Photoshop, I don't know if that's accurate, but let's say at least 20 years of using Photoshop, certainly, I figured, well, again, it's an Adobe product, how hard could it be, right? And steep learning curve, maybe it's just because I'm getting older, I don't know, but it was a steep learning curve, and still is, of doing basic stuff in Premiere, but I'm learning, and alhamdulillah, man, YouTube is a wonderful resource. I've taken a few classes on Udemy, which are cool, but I have to say probably the bulk of what I've been able to learn has been through YouTube and then some trial and error. But I'm hoping to be able to, legitimately do something, with this. It's allowing me to even further kind of blend two major interests of mine, which is the Imam thing, and photography, which I guess now videography. I don't know why. For me, videography always kind of seemed like camcorders. But it sounds weird to call this film, because coming from when I actually used to process all my old film, whatever the word is, it's allowing me to bring together two interests that I definitely have. So anyway, last thought before I go, this popped in my head, man. My friend Imam Suhaib sent me this link about some conference they're having in Irvine about free will, right? And then on top of it, I happen to have been reading and looking at some interviews with David Berlinski, the author of The Devil's Delusion, which, if you're not familiar, is kind of like a secular critique of atheism, right? And one of the things that Berlinski, one of the questions that he poses to the hardcore atheists, right, the scientific atheists, he's like, why are the rules of nature, like, why are they so fixed, right? Like, why does the speed of light travel at that speed and only at that speed? Why doesn't, and these two things started bouncing around in my head, and I started thinking about how, especially in the Islamic tradition, right, that angels are seen as these beings who they merely fulfill God's commands, like they don't disobey him. And that angels are made of light. And if light is fixed, right, and it doesn't change, then it really gave, something to consider about how the malaika, how the angels, right, why are they so fixed in their temperament, in their disposition, not that I tend to actually frown at these sort of like using science to prove Islam things, and I'm not saying this proves anything, but it was kind of an interesting idea to look at these two things and how maybe there is some correlation, between them. But anyway, that's my typical day, right? My head is bouncing around between 101 different things. I'm sure yours probably is too. So anyway, I'm gonna see how this footage turns out. Actually, this is some of the first SLOG footage I'm trying. Want to see how the dynamic range works out, because it's 3:35 right now, and here in Southern California, that means the sun is on full tilt. So going to see what kind of exposure I can get out of this, if I'm getting some extra latitude in my exposure. So anyway, we'll be checking in soon. Assalamu alaikum.